Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Leadership Matters, a weekly half-hour series aimed at supporting leaders simply because leadership matters. I am Dr. Kenroy Burke, and this evening I encourage you to invite a friend, tell somebody about the broadcast as we add value to lives. I believe in the importance of success. Yes, success is a grand thing. The experience success is phenomenal. But I believe that as people, we ought to aim at living lives of significance where we make an impact on others for a lifetime. And this evening, I am privileged to have with me Dr. Michael Holford, pastor and leadership consultant. He is here this evening to have a conversation with us, share the broadcast, let somebody know that we are on. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Dr. Kenroy. It is good to be here. It is always good to converse on the area of leadership, and it's always good to talk to a brother in Christ, a former schoolmate, and sharing common values and common passions. So it's great to be
Well,
here.
I would advise you not to say a former schoolmate lest you age yourself. But it's good
That
to
is
have
very
you.
true.
Yeah, it's good to have you with us this evening. Michael, we're going to be talking a little bit about leadership. And as you said, an exciting discussion, always a grand conversation to have. I believe and I'm convinced that the majority of the issues, as well as those great things that have happened even in our region, are as a result of leadership. And we want to
Yeah.
engage others in this conversation as we move forward. So let's start at the point. Who is Michael? Who is Michael Holford?
Well, I am a Christian, a believer in Jesus Christ. I am married to my lovely wife, Lois. We have two sons, Zachary and Zarin. Zarin is a newborn, came in right before Christmas. And, it is wonderful to be a husband and a father. As well, I am a pastor. I pastor at the Abundant Life Assembly. I'm part of the eldership, the leadership team there. And my experience has been I grew up in a Christian home. My brother and I, married, our parents are married or were married because my father passed away. And we grew up hearing the values not only of Christ, but also the values of leadership. And my father, not every morning, but he would ensure at least once a week to bang on our door to wake us up and say, you shall be the head and not the tail. You shall be a living example of godliness in your life. And for me at the time, it was, I want sleep. Why are you saying these things? But he was not just instilling those things by declaring the word of the Lord, but he was also doing it by example and teaching us practical values about leadership. So, and my family, we come from a family of leaders, a family of pioneers. Of course, you would know my uncle Apostle Stephen Holford. My dad himself was a pastor. From my mother's side, my great grandfather was Luther Thorne. So always that push for excellence in leadership. So I've had various experiences. I've led a youth ministry both inside the church and as well as a power church organization, Youth for Christ. I led that for a short time after one of our, once again, former schoolmates, Earl Pierce, demitted office. I've led a gospel music band, KDB, and I've always been looking to do things differently, somewhat outside of the box, but of course within the boundaries of what God would have me to do as a leader. So I've always had a passion for leadership. I've always found myself in areas where leadership was required, and I believe that leadership is an area where there's always the question of, are you born a leader or are you taught to be a leader? I believe there's a third option within the church. You're called to be a leader, but I think in any of those, you have to learn to truly learn to lead and lead well. So that's about it where I'm concerned. There's much more I can say, but we we only have half hour, so I'll stop there.
Okay. Okay, great, Michael. Great start. We're looking now at leadership. Let's talk a little bit about the whole concept of leadership. This COVID-19 experience has truly challenged almost everything that we would have been taught in leadership classes, etc. What has that experience been like for you during this COVID period? What has it been like? Have you been forced to do things differently? Tell us a little bit about what Michael's experience has been on a day-by-day basis.
Well, I first of all, I believe leadership happens at all levels, right? And it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily call for you to be in charge of something, but there is a level of responsibility that gives you influence. And for me, starting from the home, there was a level of facing this crisis, starting from last year, where I had to consider what could happen and what needs to be done. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't start out very well. I didn't start out
Right.
how we would read in all of our leadership books.
I I want to encourage you, Michael. None of us did.
Yeah,
None of us did.
that's the thing,
I don't think there was anybody who could raise their hand today and say, "Oh, it was brilliant for me." The start was
right.
pretty rough for everybody.
And this is the thing that I learned throughout this crisis and this pandemic. Leadership calls for resilience. It doesn't call for perfection. It calls for resilience. It calls for a mindset of saying, I didn't get it right this time, but something needs to be done, and I need to keep going. People are depending on me. People are hurting. People are struggling. People are looking for answers. I may not have the answer, but I need to connect with people emotionally. I need to show that level of compassion, that level of empathy. So for me, as I said, didn't start out too great. But as time went on, I understood, even as I trusted in the Lord to guide me in all things, that there was a position to have which called for a steady, consistent leadership, steady, consistent mindset as to this is how we're going to navigate this situation. We are all learning at the same time. Even the scientists, even the medical experts were learning at the same time. So it meant those of us who were affected by it were learning as well. We were compensating as we went along. We made mistakes as we went along. We made corrections. But I think one of the other things I learned is that even where mistakes were made, the true failure is in stopping. The true
Yeah.
failure is in not getting up and going again and re-evaluating the situation and
Mhm.
asking the necessary questions, asking, what may need to be done differently. What, am I looking at this particular issue or problem from the wrong perspective? Do I need to look at it from a different lens? So all of this occurred, as I said, with my family, in terms of our church, the different changes that we had to make, where our church was concerned. We have a very large senior community, and we had to first of all make sure that they were out of harm's way. We still had to make sure that there was a way to connect with them. We had to ensure that there was a way to connect with our other
Yeah.
members, to have that sense that, even though we are apart, we are still connected. We are still communicating. So there are a number of things we did at the level of our eldership in terms of meeting and putting plans together. And I can tell you this: one of the first plans we put together right before the first lockdown last year. We thought we had it all together. This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna put this phone system in place, the next thing in
Yeah.
place, and then the government completely changed what they initially said they would do if we started to go into a lockdown. And we had to be resilient. We had to make quick changes. We had to understand what was happening. Some plans we put in place. The vendors who would help us to implement these plans didn't come through the way that we wanted, but we had to keep going. So as I said, one of the things I learned is that true failure only comes when you stop, and even a temporary failure is still a stepping stone to success. And that's one of the things that I learned in this crisis.
That's fantastic, Michael. Michael, I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you talking about this whole concept of resilience. I want us to investigate this a little bit more. Let's define
Mhm.
this whole concept of resilience. What do you see it as? And how do we teach our young people this whole
Mhm.
concept of resilience? Is it something that is transferable? Is it something that we are, as leaders, ought to be intentional about sharing with others?
Mhm. Resilience is basically endurance, the ability to go through a situation. You are affected by the situation, but you do not give up. You and of course from a biblical position, we see this type of strength being given as we tap into the Lord, and we trust in Him. So I would say two things. This type of resilience, this type of holding on, this type of not giving up, yes, can be transferred at the level of modeling. So people have to see in us, their leaders, people who follow us, people who look to us for advice, for counsel, must see resilience in us. So at that
Mhm,
level, we could probably argue that it could be transferred through modeling. I see
mhm,
my leader, my pastor, the manager of my business, the CEO being resilient through this crisis. I see the reward that comes from it, and therefore
mhm,
I believe that this is a type of behavior, or this is a practice that I can take on in my own life, and see similar types of rewards. But also, as I said, from a spiritual position, I believe the true transfer comes from the Lord, because the Bible tells us, in various places, about waiting upon the Lord, having our strength renewed, and all of this is part of the whole issue of resilience. And I know every person who is watching this
mhm.
is not necessarily a Christian, and of course we would encourage trusting in the Lord. But even from an inherent strength, there must be that mindset that I'll
Yeah.
keep pushing in spite of the challenges that I am going through. There are sometimes that we need to take a pause and
Mhm.
reflect, but there is a part of that that requires us to keep going, and to not give up.
Yeah. All right. So we're talking about this resilience. We're finding a whole set of persons, even during this period, this challenging period. There are mental health issues. There are all kind of things. How do we guard against these things as a leader? What would you say to leaders who find themselves struggling, find themselves feeling like if they would give up, find themselves feeling under pressure? What would you say to those
Mhm.
leaders?
No, no. First of all, as we all know, that there are different forms of stress, and some stress is positive, and some stress is negative, and some
Yeah.
stress comes as a process of what we are in right now, a crisis. In other words, you don't have any control over it. So for the leader, there has to be a time of introspection. There has to be a time of understanding. Can I bear this load? We want to be strong, we want to look strong, we want to appear strong. That's what all the leadership books say. I must be a
Mhm.
person of influence, so I must have a
Yeah.
particular look. But if a leader cannot function, because they are being broken down emotionally and mentally, then they are no use, to anyone, inclusive of themselves. So it requires leaders to take a pause, to do some introspection. What is it that is overwhelming me? What is it
Yeah.
that I can't seem to navigate? Is there someone that I can talk to? Because many times we isolate ourselves as leaders, because we want to appear as, the superman, the superwoman. And
Mhm.
sometimes there are persons who we can turn to, We can turn to the Lord in prayer. We can turn to an older leader. We can turn to someone who may be in a similar industry, and they're going through the same thing, but they've found a way to navigate these issues. So it requires talking it out, talking to yourself, talking to God if you're a believer, talking to another individual, even sometimes just as a sounding board. I've found for
Yeah.
myself there are times that I've just talked to someone. There were no words, there was no deep quotable that I could say, yes, I feel motivated. Just getting it off of your chest, just being able to talk about it, just being able to recognize it may not be as bad as it seemed as it was going
Yeah.
through your mind, right? As we know, the mind can be a killer. The mind can prevent our forward movement, and sometimes it calls for that talking through. And then there are
Yeah.
other times it calls for a stop. Stop. I can't deal with this right now. I need to retreat. And retreat here is not cowardice. It's not fear, but is understanding that if I don't stop now, I am going to be irreparably damaged going
Yeah.
forward. So I need to take this break right now. Right. And there are times we just need to do that on a regular basis, just to take a
Yeah.
break, to regather ourselves, to regather our thoughts, look at the situation again, and then perhaps go again in the future.
Yeah, correct. Well said. I'm thinking now of one of what I call the delicious topics in leadership today. Future leadership. I think that COVID has brought us to a place where we can no longer see leadership the way that we would have seen it through that myopic lens. And there's a
Mhm.
lot that has happened over the last year that has pushed us into several different spheres. I would want you to this evening to tell us, what do you think leadership will look like moving forward? And
Okay.
I'm thinking post COVID, but I don't even know if there is such a thing as post COVID. What will leadership look like moving forward?
Right. I believe leadership now. Now, of course, if we are talking about post COVID, where COVID still exists, there are still certain protocols in place. It might mean our gatherings may be more virtual than they were before. But I think what leadership has to become is more real. The mysticism of leadership and leaders and what you might call super leaders of the past has been at a level good to motivate persons to a particular behavior. But the truth is, not everyone will be able to ascend to those types of levels. I know you're a John Maxwell coach and trainer. Not everyone will be a John Maxwell, and this is the absolute truth. But one of the things that leaders have to become is
Yeah.
real about their feelings, real about their challenges, real about their triumphs, in a way that speaks to those who follow, to those who are influenced, to say to them, whatever your sphere is, you need to make an impact that makes a difference to others. Leaders have to be more
Yeah.
relational.
Mhm.
As I said, the mysticism of leadership, where a leader is way out there, we can never touch them, we can never converse with them. And I'm not saying we can converse with every single person at a particular level, but at the same time, leaders should not set themselves in such a way that we become gods,
Yeah.
that we become
Yeah.
untouchable to what may be seen as the common man, right? And it calls for leaders to be intentional about being relational. One of the leaders from my past career in the banking industry that always I always remember. He was the VP of the Barbados unit of the financial institution I was a part of, and he made an effort to go to every branch and to speak to every single person in every branch, finding out their names, finding out particular things about them. And he could always remember if you told him, I have two
Mhm.
kids, a wife, or whatever. When he came again, he could remember all of those details about the particular person, right? Now, I'm not saying
Yeah.
that everyone has that type of memory, but the impact, the perception of his employees was this man cares. Now, I have no idea when he went in his office if he said,
Yeah.
you know, I tricked them again. You know, I pulled it off once again. My fabulous memory worked on my behalf. But the perception of those who were under him was that he cared. And we don't want to give a
Yeah.
perception that is not real, but we want to realistically connect with others and have that relational type of connection.
I want to say this, Michael. People feel real leadership. People feel
Mhm.
real leadership. They know when you care. They know when you are empathetic. They understand when it goes beyond the task that is ahead of them and what they're required to do. People feel real leadership. And I
Yes.
would never want anybody who's listening to doubt that. That is why you need to be so much more intentional about it. So much more. Now, Michael, you said something that is critical, and I wanted to jump in a little bit on. I was having a conversation in recent times on the importance of this whole concept of being real, but being true to yourself and true to who you are and understanding where you fit in this entire thing. I'm finding today
Hmm.
that there are several persons who want to be everything. They want to
Hmm.
be emotional, motivational speaker, the leadership consultant, they're trying their very best. Very recently, I saw my friend actually doing today, I think, put a quote on it, and I said, I
Yes,
must talk
yes.
to Michael about this because we are trying our very best to be every single thing. Let's talk a little bit about that. What is your advice to that person who might be feeling their way out? Not necessarily sure. Sometimes they're feeling their way out. What is your advice to that person today?
Right. So I mean, in terms of someone feeling their will, of course they're experimenting. They're probably looking at their mentor, someone they look up to, and they're thinking, "I want to be like that person." One of the things I've talked about is mentorship, right?
Mm,
And one of the things that helps persons understand where you fit and where you belong is through mentorship and true mentorship. I'm not talking about carrying somebody's briefcase or wiping their brow or anything like that. I'm talking about a relationship that looks at where I believe I want to be, what it will take to get there, if it is a realistic goal, or is it something I'm just fantasizing about because it seems glorious. One of the
but
things that
Michael,
happened.
before you go any
Mhm.
further, I want to jump in
Mhm.
here and I want to say, even though we're not asking people to do that and it is not required of them, the mentee will be willing to do it if it is going to add value to the mentor. If you understand what I'm saying. So
Right,
if your attitude must be a willingness to serve. We're not asking anybody to
right,
be a servant, but your
right.
attitude must be a willingness to serve. If you get the point that I'm trying to make here.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And I can speak of my own experiences, having been mentored and mentoring others. There must be a level of serving on both sides.
Yeah.
But for the mentee, there has to be an understanding that I'm learning from this person, right? There is
Yeah.
something that this individual has achieved, that I see in them that will be helpful to my future, and from that perspective, there is a submissive relationship that's not abusive. It is not to clone the person, to make them into a second you or a third you, but it is to develop that individual with best
Correct.
practices that helps them to know where is it that I really belong. And here's one thing I want to add. There are persons who go through various situations and experiences that lead them to a final point. So for
Mm.
instance, I've led, as I said, I've led a music group, KDB. I've led a youth group in church and a para church organization. I've been involved in various things in the banking industry, but all of those experiences are helpful and now I'm looking back, were critical to
Yeah.
where I am now. The
Yes.
difference was I didn't get into those things because I was trying to be the most popular guy on the
Yeah.
block. I believe these were things I was supposed to do at the particular time. Even in the case of the banking industry, there was a point
Powerful.
where I
Powerful.
wanted to leave. Right, I wanted to leave, but there were things that I could look back now and said, if I did not stay there for those 18 years, I would never have learned those things. I was under five or six different managers in my time at that banking institution. All of them were stylistically different as leaders, but all of them were good and successful leaders in terms
Yeah.
of the metrics that was given by that institution. But there were different, completely different individuals in the way they led, in the way they connected with others, in terms of their goal sets and all of these different things. But that experience taught me that if you are to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower.
Yeah.
You have to
Correct.
understand the vision of the organization that
Correct.
you are part of. You have to understand the authority figures in that organization. You have to understand what your role is and play your role. Sorry to use that term, but play your role to
Mhm.
100%, a hundred and
Yeah.
ten percent before you can think about stepping to the next level. And of course, we all have our different capacities, but if you're just thinking, I'm here, but I want to be out there, but I haven't learned the basics at this level, you'll fail when you get, if you get there, you will fail.
Yeah.
You
You
will
will.
fall short.
You definitely will. No, Michael, time is galloping. It's galloping. 30 minutes, remember, not 3 hours. So I want to
Yes.
ask you, this program, I like to believe that Leadership Matters is about adding value. We have lots of young persons who are watching us. How would you instruct that young person who, again, is trying to find their footing in leadership? You started to share some things there that I love, but what else would you
Mhm.
say to them, that young person? Probably the same way, the same experience you and your brother had of your father walking
Mhm.
in the room and speaking. What are those things that you now want to walk into the room and speak into the lives of your two Z's?
Yeah. So I would definitely encourage, whether it's my sons or another young man or young woman, to first of all be authentically who they are, to understand who they are, to understand their own personalities, the things that make them tick, the things that make them stop, and to have a better understanding of themselves, to have a better understanding of what their future goals are, and to be able to talk through with them in terms of
Yeah,
those goals. Okay, you have this particular goal. How do you intend to get to this goal? What are the things that you're willing to do? What are the
yeah,
things that you're willing to sacrifice? Right? Are you willing to put in the energy and the time into achieving this goal, so that you come to completion? One of
yeah,
the things I would say to that person, because I understand, I am always constantly aware. Yes, I came from a two-parent home, both parents being married, but some many of our young people have not, and this is where mentorship comes in. To be able to say to that person, "I'll walk with you." I
yeah,
may not be able to walk the full length of the. Someone may come and take over. It may be like a relay race in terms of mentorship, right? But I'm willing to start the walk with you in that process, so you can know that there's someone you can turn to, that you can call on, that you can bounce things off of, so you don't feel that you are alone. A lot of our young people are pursuing things, but they're pursuing things alone because they've
yeah.
been left alone, and they feel that they have to make their way alone. But we understand that true success doesn't come in solitary confinement. It doesn't happen as an island. It happens as part of a team, part of a unit, and it
Side
is
by side
necessary.
leadership.
Exactly. And that's why it's necessary for persons like myself and you and others to walk with these people. There's no competition. There's no, I don't want to see somebody get ahead of me. As a matter of fact, I think one of the greatest things that can happen to a leader is to walk with someone through that mentorship process and see them excel even
Yeah.
beyond where you've ever been able to go. And I think
Correct.
that is something that is a greater joy than being in competition with anyone.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Absolutely solid. So, Michael, we are right now in the toenail of our time. And I would want you to be able to speak now to Michael. I love to do a little something different. What would you have said to Michael at 16 years old? Michael at 16
Mhm.
years old, when he felt as though what the adult in his life was saying was of no value to him. What would you have said to Michael at that age?
I'll try to make this as short as possible. At that age, I had just stopped down in fourth form at our former or our alma
Mm,
mater, and it was at that point that I recognized some of the things that my dad was saying to me. And
yeah.
if I could speak to my younger self, I would say to myself, yes, you've come against a failure, you've come against a moment in your life which is embarrassing, but you can still climb from here. You can still learn from this moment and you can overcome this moment, even though it is of your own doing, it is of your own lack of initiative or whatever the case
Mhm.
may be. Forgive yourself, look at where you fell down and move again. And that's why I would probably say to my 16-year-old self, listen to your dad. um hear what he's saying, get up,
Important.
get involved in some other things, and keep moving.
Wow, thank you so very much, Michael. Thank you so very much for your input this evening in Leadership Matters. Extremely valuable points that you've made. I want to encourage those persons who are viewing with us. I saw some people doing it today, but I want to encourage you to just drop some notes there. Anything that stood out with you, even within these couple seconds, you just type it right there and encourage somebody who will come after and watch this broadcast. One of the things that I extremely intentional about is leaving lessons for those who come after us. And after 30 minutes of solid presentation like this, I would want somebody to be able to learn from this experience. Thank you again, Michael, for sacrificing your time to be with us. I know you got to get back to babysitting, one of the
Thank
joys of the leadership journey. But
Yes.
I know that you're going to do a great job. Thank you so very
Thank
much.
you, sir.
And I also thank your wife for giving you permission to be away for a few minutes.
Yes, yes, yes. The AG.
Yes, thank you. So this has been Leadership Matters, a weekly half-hour series aimed at supporting leaders. And this evening we had a wonderful conversation with Dr. Michael Holford, pastor and leadership consultant. I've been truly blessed this evening with all of his thoughts and the solid points that he has made. I encourage you to join us again next week, this same time, 6 p.m. Next week, Monday at 6 p.m., as we continue the conversation on leadership. We talk leadership and we talk leadership matters simply because leadership matters. Thank you very much.
Okay, gentlemen, we are